Today I'm speaking with Dr. Jennifer Lincoln. I love interviewing other podcasters. Like I was just saying, like your audio is so lovely and like you got headphones and a microphone. I'm like, right? This is nice. Yeah.
It's like we've done this before. We know what's
I know. Some people show up on like their cell phones. I'm like, oh
yeah.
no.
I remember those days. Yes.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's not enough. I'm like, it isn't.
Okay. So you are an OBGYN. I literally, as I was waiting for you to come into this whatever virtual platform, I was looking at your Instagram and just saw, this is like breaking news. So you just accepted a new role as executive director of Mayday.
I sure
correct?
Did.
And so
I just
can
threw
you
that
tell
up
us?
like, yeah, right before this. I said, I think I can get this post up before I have to record.
I know. And I was like, oh, look at me being like an investigative reporter here.
Yes. You got the scoop. You scooped it. Yeah. So I'm going to be the president and executive director of Mayday Health, which is a health education nonprofit. They are focused on helping people access abortion care, specifically medication abortion in all 50 states. So they're a fun little group. They started up after Roe fell, and they are this amazing group of people who get stuff done. And we were sort of working together just because I wanted to elevate what they were doing, and it was just so aligned. And then they said, hey, we're looking for an executive director. And I thought, oh, you don't want me. I'm just a vagina doctor. Like, that's not what I do. And then they're like, no, we should talk. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a great way to use my training in a different way. And so here we go. So I'm just going to slide that into my repertoire now, starting in January. Should be
I love
fun.
it. It's like, you sound like me, like, oh, I'm so busy, but let's just keep adding.
Right.
To adding to it.
Exactly. Why not? Why not?
No, I love that. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
So my husband is a urologist, but yeah, so he's a penis doctor.
Yeah, but we love a good urologist when something goes crazy and there's a bladder involved, or yes, we sure do. Oh, that's so fun. But I specifically went into my field. I was like, no, thank you, penises like at work. So it's the total opposite.
Yeah. So how do you? I'm always fascinated by physicians that are also so active on social media. You have like a whole YouTube channel, like 3 million on TikTok. How do you find time to do all of that? Like, what is when do you do your content creation?
Well, honestly, I always tell people, I like to preface it with, I work part-time. And I think that's really clear to be really transparent, because I think that if I was full-time on labor and delivery, which I work as an OB hospitalist, so I do 12-hour shifts on labor and delivery. If I was doing that at a full-time rate, like it just wouldn't be possible, or I would need a lot of people helping me. So being part-time certainly helps. The other thing too, and it's just, it sounds so cheesy, but when you love something, it doesn't feel like work. And that's partially a lie, right? Because we all get burnt out from stuff and we all need a break. But now more than ever, especially, I love communicating on social media. I love thinking, how can I make this simple? How can I reach more people? How can I fight back at the garbage that's out there? Because there's so much. And so while it might feel like a little bit of work sometimes, it's also super fun, where I get this idea and then I'm like, I'm going to make this into a really aesthetically pleasing post, or I'm going to simplify it. And then seeing it get attention, not in a narcissistic way, but in a way of people who are like, oh my goodness, I got my COVID vaccine because of you, or I felt comfortable going to the doctor because I saw your YouTube video about pelvic exams. Like, knowing you're having that effect on people, it's like a wonderfully, I guess, a healthy version of a high, where it's a really good feeling of endorphins and you feel like you've helped somebody, and so you want to keep doing it. So it's because I'm part-time. It's because I love it. It's because my kids are now older. And so they're in school, thank goodness. So they're in 1st and 6th grade. So not having little ones around, because I do want to set that standard for other moms who are listening. Like, no, I was not doing all of this when I had really young kids. It just wasn't possible. And I have a partner who's super supportive. He's a pediatrician, so he definitely gets it. And he's like, Jen, this is your moment. Like, you need to be able to do this. And I've just got some really awesome cheerleaders in my corner. I also drink a lot of coffee, which I really like.
I know. I got my hair done yesterday, and my hairdresser was like, oh, I got rid of coffee in the morning and now I'm doing lemon water. And I'm like, oh man, like, should I do that too? Like, it sounds like and my naturopath too, for digestion.
I know. But like, listen, Listen, I'm going to tell you right now. If anybody ever tells me to get rid of coffee, I'm getting rid of them because it is like the light in my life. My kids know when they wake up, they have to do 2 things. They have to feed the cat because he'll meow and wake us all up. And they have to press the button to turn the coffee maker on. Like those are just non-negotiables because if I come downstairs and there's no coffee, like nobody's going to do well. So,
are you the kind of person that goes to bed looking forward to the morning because of coffee?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Same.
And being in Portland, Oregon, it's a mecca of coffee. Like my little neighborhood that I'm in, we have 5 coffee shops within a 2-block radius, and you get spoiled. And I mean, we do not spend a lot of money. We're like very normal people. We don't have fancy cars or go on like European vacations every 2 weeks, but we will buy that expensive coffee because it's like, it is literally, it's the light of my life.
Yeah. Hey,
and
no
I love
shame.
it. And if that's going to be my drug of choice, like I'm kind of okay with it, you know?
Yeah, I heard this thing once and it was like the number 1 drug in the world is coffee.
Yeah. It's good old caffeine. And
like,
listen, if that's what it's going to be, that's what it's going to be. And I'm fine. And if you try and judge me, then we're just not going to be friends. So it's okay.
I love that. Okay, before we get into vulva things, obviously, I saw your content that you did with Obama. I'm Canadian, but still, like, Canadians love Obama. So my Obama story is when I was in my PhD, I was living in Ottawa, and I lived, like, just a block from Parliament in Ottawa. And so when he first became president, he did this trip to Parliament, and it was like this whole big thing. So it was like a blizzard outside, but I put on my toque, I put on my like parka, my boots, and went up to Parliament Hill, and lots of people had done that and just waited to like get a glimpse of him. I was like, what am I doing? But I was like, oh, this is like a once in a lifetime thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so he just like came out and like waved, and I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. Aww. And then they basically shut down the city until he got out of the area. But of course, like he went to the little market first. So we're all standing there, and they blocked off all the roads. We couldn't walk like across the street. So I couldn't get home until he had like left. Until he had like left the area, and I was like, oh my God, but I got to see him with my own eyes. But you actually got to film a TikTok with him. What was this whole experience like?
It was crazy. I got to touch his shoulder, and he touched my shoulder, and it was all, there was nothing more than that, Michelle. Don't worry, everything was fine. So it was this thing where I was partnering with with a bunch of other creators via the DNC. And their goal was to basically help get information and voter education out to young people. So a bunch of creators on TikTok. And so we were chatting with them about, messages that we thought resonated, especially in the fall of Roe v. Wade. And they organized this little field trip to Washington, D.C. And we got to make a TikTok with Obama about getting out the vote, which was crazy and amazing. And he is just as sweet in real life. Like he's a legitimate, he's a genius, right? He's so smart, but emotionally he's just such a people guy. And so we got to do that. And then we also got to go to the White House and see President Biden get his updated COVID booster. And then afterwards we got to hang out with him. He took us to the Oval Office. I got to meet Anthony Fauci, who is a physician. Like that's when I almost stopped. Like I passed out. I was thinking, oh my goodness, like here is this man who has given me so much hope. And then we did a White House tour. We got a tour of the Capitol. It was super fun. And what I loved about these TikToks that we did with President Obama, everything has to be approved and appropriately so. And we had our little Q&A session in the beginning, and then we each filmed one at a time. And he nailed every single TikTok, like boom, boom, boom. Like the man knows what he's doing. So, it was just sort of surreal. And it was just so fun getting to giggle with him. And
he seems like the kind of person that like whoever he's in a room with, he makes everybody feel like special and like he's really engaged and and
the same thing with President Biden. Of course, it was super fun meeting him too. He was just like he's just like your grandpa. And he wasn't supposed to take us into the Oval Office. That was not part of our planned time, but he took my arm. He's like, do you want to go to the Oval Office? And I said, Mr. President, does anybody ever say no? And he's like, come on. And you could see all the security people being like, they're going to the West Wing, come on.
Yeah.
It was so fun. But he did that, and he talked with us for almost an hour. And we knew that he had other meetings he had to reschedule because of that, but he just loves talking to people. And I'm sure there's people who are listening to your podcast who, might not have voted for these people or might not like them. But it was just really cool to have somebody who took the time to chat with us and listened. Mm-hmm. And it's just cool to see they're normal people, like in the People magazine, celebrities. They're just like us. They just have a lot of security around them.
Yeah, a lot of security.
A lot of security, yep.
I love that. Okay, so the first thing I thought we could go over, just very basic. Like, we're taking it back to, well, not school, because I don't think I learned this in school.
Me neither.
Yeah. And so I remember taking anatomy in high school. Like, the whole class was just built around anatomy and, like, memorizing parts of the body. I got, like, 99% because I'm really good at memorizing stuff. Mm-hmm. But not once did we go over the anatomy of, like, the female... I guess we did the reproductive system, like the inside, but not like the vulva, the clitoris, like none of that.
Yeah. Now, did you do the penis and the scrotum, or did they just like
I
blur
think
both
so.
of those out? Oh,
no,
so of course you did that.
I think we did.
Yeah, I'm sure you did, right? And then it's just for the other ones, they're like, sorry, it's just that. It's just down there.
That other stuff doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So let's just...
it's very mysterious. We're not quite sure what to call it yet.
Yeah, so true. So give us just like the rundown of our anatomy.
Well, it's funny you should ask because I brought my puppet.
Yes! I love it.
I have 4. And I was like, which puppet should I use? And that's life in my house. Yeah. So I think the key point is that most people refer to this whole thing. And if you're just listening and not watching, I'm holding a vulva puppet, as one does. And most people call this whole thing the vagina. And it's not. The vagina is the inside part. And that might sound really basic, but so many of us don't know that. And
okay, so the vagina... I used to be one of those people that just called everything a vagina.
Me too. Yeah.
So the vagina is literally just like the canal on the inside, and then that goes into the cervix.
Correct. It ends, and then the cervix is sitting there at the end. So the vagina is just this muscular tube that can obviously dilate and stretch for childbirth and for accommodating things like penises. And that's just the inside part. And it ends with the cervix. And the cervix is like the entrance, the little opening of the uterus. But the whole outside part is what we call the vulva. And the vulva has different parts, which, again, a lot of us were not taught. So there's the labia, which are the lips. You've got the labia majora, which is this outside part here. That's that part where you have the hair. And then the inner part, the labia minora. Not like a menorah, like a Jewish menorah, but a different kind of menorah. And these can be different appearing. They can look with both of those lips kind of hanging out. They might be tucked in. They can be uneven, and that's normal. There's a whole huge range of what's normal. At the very top, you've got the clitoris, and that's just the tiny part of the clitoris you can see. It's actually got what we call like little legs that run underneath and around the side of the vagina. And the urethra, which is where the pee comes out. I don't have one on my model here, but it's under the clitoris. That's like the basics. And then if you're going to the medical terms, there's all these other terms that we use for like purposes of, surgery and describing things that might tear and that sort of thing. But very few of us were ever taught even the difference between a vulva and a vagina, I'm happy to hear that in Canada it wasn't much better, but in the US it's a hot mess. It just depends where you live. Different states have different requirements of what they teach or what they don't teach.
So and is it still that way?
Oh God, yes. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, I have this one TikTok that went kind of viral. It was a little girl who had a puppet kind of like this. She was like maybe 6 or 7, and she's talking about the little parts, and it's adorable. And not my child, but I do edit it. And I thought, this is so great. She's just so innocent. She's just talking about a body part, and it's just a thing. Just like if she was going through like, this is my thumb and this is my finger. And a lot of people loved it, but there were still a bunch of people who were like, this is sexualizing her at such a young age. How dare they do that? I'm thinking nobody, when you teach your kids like their eyes and their nose and their mouth, you're not like, oh my gosh, their mouth, they could use that for blowjobs. Like, no, nobody says that. So like, why are we? It's just anatomy. You can teach names without teaching things that are, age appropriate at different ages. And I just don't understand why people don't get that.
Do you know what it's like in Europe? Is it the same?
My understanding from what I've heard from my followers is that it's much better.
Okay.
Like most things.
Because I realized that like our culture, like were the issue when I went to Italy and like people are just like naked in the saunas and I was like so uncomfortable.
Right.
And I was like, hey, this is a me problem.
Yeah.
Like, because
well, Taylor Swift, it's like, I'm the problem, it's me, but the me is this whole society, which this is why we feel this way. When you're not taught it, like when you weren't taught about the vulva and the vagina, what that intrinsically tells young people is this is too shameful or dirty. We can't even tell you about it. So what do? Like we go home, we look it up on porn or wherever, and then you get a whole screwed up view of what it's supposed to be. Absolutely. It's us, but it's not our fault. Because, you know, that's what we were taught and that's what our parents were taught. So it's all about undoing this, which I do feel like we're getting there with things like social media, which can be great. People can get good information. There's still a lot of bad stuff out there, but especially Gen Z, they have a lot more ability to take things in their own hands. And I feel like they're not afraid or ashamed to say words like vagina and orgasm. Like it's getting better. Every generation, I do think it gets better.
Yeah. Even for me, like I'm pretty open. I talk about everything and like I'm an oversharer. That's what I do for a living is like, you know. And even me, like I listen to some podcasts where the hosts are younger. I'm 37. And like just hearing them talk about like sex and like I'm like, oh,
right. Clutch my pearls. Oh no.
Yes. And I'm like, I know that I like that they are doing that and that kind of content is out in the world and it's not making it like this big taboo thing. It's just like, no, this is like, we're humans and this is what humans do. Like, and it's okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Although what I do think is kind of hilarious. So my podcast, when you go on Apple Podcasts, in like the description, it's, you know, I can't even remember what it is, but it's, you know, talks about vagina, nipple, scrotum. And Apple Podcast bleeped out scrotum. So it's got like the S and the M and then the letters in between. And I'm kind of excited because they left nipple and like vagina. Like for once, the misogyny, like it's going the other way. But what is it about them? They're like, whoa, scrotum. That's a step way too far. Like I just don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't.
Oh my God. Okay, so can we talk about how the anatomy can vary from person to person? And like you brought up porn. And so in my mind, I'm thinking we are not open. Like for example, in Europe, they're like having saunas as a family. Like you're seeing everybody's bodies. It's not sexualized. It's just people go to the spa, they're naked. You're exposed to naked bodies. Whereas in our society, it's like, you don't even see your parents naked, like by the time you're a certain age, you know? So a lot of people, like you were saying, see bodies in porn, like naked bodies. Where else are you going to see it?
Yeah.
And like how that can be damaging for people with, you know, looking at that and being like, oh, they all look the same. Why do I look different?
Exactly.
But in reality, there's like a huge range.
Yeah, there's a huge range of normal, and I can't tell you the number of messages I get on social media from people who think there's something wrong or think it looks ugly, they've been mocked by somebody, or they've seen a TikTok or an account or something that's made fun of people looking a certain way. And yeah, when you think about porn, you think about, you know, they're typically hairless, they typically have very tiny labia, and when you really break it down, it's actually really perverted because what's idealized in porn is this idea of a prepubescent body, right? Like the barely 18, like it's literally, they want it to kind of look childlike because there's that idea that like it's a virginal and it's somehow more desirable, but it's really perverted. And that's not how most of us look, and that's fine. And so two resources that I love are online accounts that you can find on Instagram or their websites are the Vulva Gallery, absolutely love, and the Labia Library. And I know that sounds really weird, but these are accounts where you can literally go and you can see drawings and also photos of what vulvas look like. And I think it's great because they're normal. And I can tell you as a gynecologist who's seen thousands of these, yes, sometimes something's abnormal, like we're talking cancerous or, you know, a skin disorder like lichen sclerosis. But it's just like, you know, flavors of ice cream. They're all very different and they're all considered ice cream, and, you know, all of them are beautiful. But when we have this one idealized way of what something's supposed to look like, not only does it psychologically harm people, but then people are out there trying to put lightening creams on their vulvas to look lighter because they can be naturally darker because of the hormones. Or they are having really crazy laser therapies or other things to remove hair, which there's ways to do these things safely, but you know, what's the reason? Or they're going so far as having surgery, like labiaplasties, to have to be surgically altered and not because of a functional issue, like they don't have any pain or issue like that, but because they're embarrassed of how they look. And I think that's really, really sad to think that you're abnormal when you haven't even seen what normal is. And people like us who are trying to tell you, but it's that one guy who makes fun of you, or, you know, or this myth that your labia are longer if you have more sex. And like, there's just so much out there, and it's really damaging.
You have to find yourself a urologist if you're looking at That's what I always think. I'm always like, he literally sees so many, but yeah, it's a good thing, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we go home and people are like, oh my God, but you looked at my da-da-da, or, you know, it's a coworker or whatever. And I'm like, honey, the second I close the door, like it's gone. It's like, think about people who, you know, do anything else 100 times a day. Like we don't, it doesn't register, and nothing is weird to us. And it's literally our job. So yeah. My favorite, I think, are like the people going to the OBGYN visits. There was the one TikTok recently, I don't know if you saw, where this woman like hid her underwear in her
God,
nightmare.
I saw that.
You saw that? And it was perfection. And she's like, disgusting. I was so mad I didn't think of that TikTok. But you know what? I go and I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, why am I hiding my underwear? She's literally about to, you know, be all up in there. What is wrong?
Like, oh my God, I have to fold this and like put it away in my purse.
Put it in a pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so funny. I forgot about that one.
That's a good one.
Does our anatomy change after giving birth vaginally?
That's an excellent question. It can, but usually not in any sort of appreciable way. The main thing, the reason people are asking is they're like, does it mean my vagina is going to be all stretched out? And I'm like, no, it's literally made to dilate and then to go back. And can that be different if you've had, let's say, an 11-pound baby vaginally and you had a certain kind of tear where you required a lot of repair? Sure, potentially. But for the vast majority of people, no. And it's not one of those things that you can, like, I could do an exam and be like, oh, you've had kids before, just by like sitting down and looking at the outside vulva or putting a speculum in. Like, it just doesn't work that way. So the short answer is maybe a little, but the bigger answer is not in any sort of way that's like, oh, it all falls apart. And I will tell you, the people who seem to think that like, and let me say, there are some situations where people do need surgery because they've got prolapse, whether it's from childbirth or other things. And that's sort of a different thing related to the anatomy, the position of where the uterus is and that kind of stuff. But this idea that like a vagina needs to be tight, like to be good for sex, always makes me wonder about the guy, because I'm like, because for us, it's really about the clitoris when it comes to the vast majority of us for sexual pleasure. It's not about the vagina. And what's his deal? Like, why does he, you know, maybe it's his problem and not a her problem, but we always frame it as like a loose vagina, right? Not like a small penis or not not having good sexual technique. But.
Yeah, let's change this narrative. Okay. Hygiene products. What I did for this interview, I was like going through all your topics and I was like, this is amazing, all these topics.
Oh, thank you.
Hygiene products. There is so much about like, oh, you should be using organic. Every time I go to buy tampons, I'm always having that in my head. But I'm like particular with what tampons I like, and so I just have never switched over to organic ones. But what is your thought on hygiene products? And also, is there one thing that's better, like pads, tampons, or like the cups that people put in?
Yeah. So I would say with hygiene products, I hate most of them. I hate that there's a feminine hygiene aisle, because where's the male hygiene aisle? Like, what about their, you know, scrotum. Doesn't that need to be cleaned? It's interesting. And I really can't stand any products that are specifically marketed for that purpose, because it's companies trying to profit off of us, making us feel dirty. And those are all the companies that you're thinking about, like the ones that pop into your head. Like it's all a scam. And almost all of them have fragrances, which that's the thing you do not want to put near your vulva. Very bad for it. But even those that are unfragranced, they're still made by the same companies. And so I actively tell people to avoid them. And I've got a YouTube video up on things that I do recommend. And I just did an update that should be up next week of some new ones. But basically anything that's gentle, that doesn't have fragrances, is really the key. And in that same aisle are the period products. And like you mentioned, there's this feeling that we should be using organic products. And I only have one rule for period products. It's just no fragrances, just none. And then use whatever you like, because truly organic is a marketing game. A lot of the stuff that's out there specific to period products, it's misinformation, because they say, well, organic products don't have chlorine gas and aren't bleached and have less dioxins. And that's actually all completely wrong. Tampons are FDA regulated. They are a medical device. So they're basically the same. And it can actually take more water to grow organic crops. So to think that it's somehow more environmentally friendly, it's not an automatic. So I do encourage people to think about that. So just use what you like and use them as directed. And if it's a tampon, not leaving it in longer than the 8 hours that you're supposed to. Menstrual cups, I think, are awesome. If that's something you want to use, it can be trial and error. I think they're cool. I think that what you do want to know, a lot of people worry about infections like toxic shock syndrome, and they're super rare regardless of what you use. But tampons and menstrual cups are about the same, but they're still exceedingly rare. And then I think the unsung hero, which I think more people are hearing about, is period underwear, which I wish had been around when I was a teenager and like so afraid to get my first period. And of course I got it at school and I had to use toilet paper and all the things. But I think that's a really cool thing to use too. So I love that we have choice. I just want people to feel that they can make their own choice and not feel guilted into spending more money on a particular brand, which is what all these companies are doing. They have the marketing budget. They know what to do to make us feel like we should be using this stuff. I will disclose I've got an upcoming partnership where I do make a TikTok with Tampax, and I'll disclose I got paid to do it. But I did it. I loved it because their angle was calling out misinformation in marketing. I was like, let me do that. And do I specifically recommend Tampax? Absolutely not. But the point is that it's not some organic company that's like trying to get you to use their product based on these like fake reasons that are not true, which I'm all about transparency.
Tampax is the Tampax Pearl. Like I have a problem with the cardboard.
Yes, that's what I used to use. Yeah. See, I don't get periods anymore because I have a REINA IUD. I haven't menstruated in a very long time, and I love that for me. But those are the ones I use. You just figure out what works for you, you know, and you just go with it.
And when I have to use a cardboard applicator, I'm like, I can't.
I know. So I will tell you, there's a company, I don't know if you heard of the period company called August.
No.
And they're really cool. They do like mail order. Again, I'm not paid. I do sit on their advisory board, but it's because I like giving people information, not because I'm getting paid to do it. But they are organic products, which again, you don't have to be organic. But what I love is everything about it is biodegradable. So the wrapper, the tampon applicator, and it's not like that crappy cardboard applicator that we all hate. It's like a certain kind of plastic that's made out of sugar or something, and it dissolves. And I was like, it's pretty cool. If I had a period, I would give those a try.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
the cardboard. The thing about the cardboard is like, can you not angle?
I know.
Can you not just make it into like an
taper
angle?
It,
Taper. That's the word. Yeah. It's
Poor
just like
vulva
a straight
Exactly.
I can't with that.
I know. There's a reason a lot of people, and then the people who just do it without an applicator, I never was one of those. I mean, I should be, right? I'm a gynecologist. I'm used to doing vaginal exams all day, but there was one of those things. It's like, I just can't do that for me. I just can't. God bless the people who can.
It doesn't I don't understand how not having an applicator even works, because doesn't it just shred because it's so dry and absorbing? I know. It's like trying to put cotton balls I don't know. I don't know.
There's the reason I never tried. Yeah.
About the fragrance, I can confirm that you should not put fragrance on, not that like you guys need me to confirm it.
You're
but
like, ask me how I know. Trust me. I know. One unsatisfied customer.
And I wish I could say that this happened when I was like a teenager or something, but no. I was in my PhD program, living by myself in Ottawa.
Love it.
And I was like, oh, like my skin is so dry. It was probably the winter or something. So don't I make a fucking bath and put cream, like fragrance cream, all in the bath water and like whoosh it around and then like have a nice relaxing bath. Then I'm calling my friend like 20 minutes later, like my vulva, I probably said vagina at the time, is on fire. Like I was in so much pain, and she was like, what did you put in your bath? I'm like, cream. She's like, you idiot. So since then
we have all done that. I remember putting peppermint essential oil in a bath. My vulva was like, good morning, like jingle bells all the way down there, and it was not good. Like, okay, note to self.
The best.
Don't do that.
The best with essential oils is, I'll never forget, there was like this, it was like a TikTok before there was TikTok. It was like this video on Instagram, and they were making fun of essential oils. I like essential oils, but for the smell.
The way they smell, yes.
But he was like making fun of like how people use it for medical reasons or, you know, thinking that it's going to cure things. And he was like, if it burns, that means it's working. And I was like, that is so funny because it does burn.
Right. You're like, no, ma'am. No.
So speaking of burning vulvas, how do we properly clean a vulva? And do you even have to clean a vagina? I remember I had my husband on, we did a whole episode on pediatric urology.
Oh, that's so cool. Yes.
One of the things that he covered was how to properly clean and like take care of a penis, because I was thinking people that have children, like if you don't know yourself how to clean, how are you supposed to teach them? And
exactly,
you know, so he went over like foreskin and like how to clean and all that stuff. So let's do that, but for vulvas and vaginas.
Yeah. And I think it's a great thing to not assume that people know. And I think like I've used this puppet to show people before how to do it, how not to do it. The number one thing is nothing goes inside. So no douches, not even just with water, because that can throw off the bacteria that are happy in there, and it can change the pH. So then bad bugs can take over. So what I tell people is you could use nothing and just let the water run over it, or when you're in the shower, whatever you have running over it. Or if you want to, just be gentle. Don't go crazy, because the skin's different down there. It's a little sensitive. So really the goal is to stay outside on the labia majora. I've had a lot of people who are like, but I need to know exactly what to do with the labia minora. And I want people to know that she's really good. She's really tough. You're probably not going to break her. I mean, you know, ideally you just want to stay on the outside, but if you are touching the labia minora a little bit, it's probably fine, but just know that that's really the most sensitive skin. So you don't need to go in the folds and like do all that stuff. Now it is different if you're talking about a baby who's got a diaper on, right? And if, you know, they poop and it's that blowout poop that goes up the back, up the front, every which way, as every parent knows, then yeah, you are going to need to get in there, and using a water wipe is a really good thing, and you know, bathing and that kind of thing. And then if you need to, using a barrier like a Vaseline or a zinc oxide to act as a barrier even before. But that's a different situation. And same thing with older people, if they're incontinent or leaking urine or losing urine, it's a little bit different. But you really don't need to do a whole lot. It really is, I know it's a weird term, but we call it a self-cleaning oven, which I realized I don't think I've ever actually cleaned an oven, so I don't really even know what that means. Like, I make my husband do that, but he's much better at that than I am. But you don't have to go in and do all this stuff and, you know, maintain it. It's like less is so much more when it comes to our vaginas and our vulvas.
I might be the only person to ever ask you this, but what is a douche? I always hear that, but I'm not even sure what it is.
I love that you don't know it, because that's a good thing. You don't want to know. So think of like, it can be a bottle or like a little squeezy thing, and it's got a tip that you insert internally, and then you squeeze this fluid in. And like Massengill makes douches.
It's a product.
Yes. Next time you're in that feminine hygiene aisle, when you're raging like I am, I like to go and like turn all the products backwards so nobody can see them, because I'm that person. But you'll see douches, and so people will there are people who will make homemade stuff, vinegar douches, water douches, but it's literally like a little peri bottle thing that you stick up there and then the fluid goes in and does whatever and then it comes out. But it's really harmful and it's unnecessary. And it's a complete waste of your money and it can make things a lot worse. There's actually only one group of people who do need to douche, and these are trans women who had surgically created vaginas. And I don't know if your husband does any of that as a urologist. I know some do. But they do need to douche because it's a different tissue and they need to keep that canal open and clean because it's a different situation. But what we call a native vagina or a vagina you're born with, you don't need to douche and you should not.
What about this? Just made me think of, I've heard this in my life. I'm not one to get yeast infections. I don't think I've ever had one, knock on wood.
Lucky girl, because they suck. Yeah. I remember when I had my first one, I was in college and I thought I had cancer because I was like, something must be terribly wrong. And again, I'm in college, a biology major, like a pretty smart person. And this was pre-internet, back in the dinosaur age. I was like, what do I do? And I went to the freaking emergency room because I didn't know what to do. I was so freaked out. And of course, this, young guy was like, you have a yeast infection. And I was like, but it has to be more because it's like all red. And
at least you didn't have a cream bath.
Yeah, at least I didn't do that. And there was no peppermint essential oil. But yes, yeast infections.
You hear about like, put yogurt, like dip a tampon in it. Like, is that all bullshit? Like,
it's such bullshit. And I have 2 YouTube videos now on things you shouldn't put in your vagina. And basically at the end of it, you can make a salad with all the things I talk about. Yogurt, garlic, parsley, apple cider vinegar. Yeah. So the idea people think is, we need lactobacillus to like reestablish the balance. So put on a tampon, stick it in. No, ma'am, please do not, because there's a ton of sugar in there that it doesn't work. And what you need when you have a yeast infection is you need medication to treat the yeast. And there's no yogurt in the world on a tampon that's going to do that. It's a terrible idea.
Are there things people can do in their daily lives to keep the bacteria, like the proper balance of good and bad bacteria? So what are some things that people can do?
So I think the biggest thing is getting rid of all those products that I talked about, because sometimes just using those products is enough to throw off the pH balance. Cotton breathable underwear is really important because synthetic fibers can trap moisture in and then can become their own little haven of bacteria that can get up in there. If you're exercising or you're swimming, getting out of those clothes, because the same thing, the sweat, the bacteria, the moisture is not so great. Also, some people use panty liners because they've got discharge and they think that's a good thing. The problem is that when you don't, it really traps it there and it can hold that moisture up really right up against the vulvar skin. So sometimes panty liners make the problem worse. And for some people, sleeping in no underwear, kind of airing things out at night can be really helpful. The other thing, too, is that we know that pubic hair has a purpose. I actually have a T-shirt that says that. I was on a podcast with these 2 lovely scientists, and they made this T-shirt and sent it to me, and it's got like a bush on it. It's phenomenal. I love it so much. I wore it to a high school when I was giving a talk once. I was like, hello, y'all invited me here. This is what I'm wearing. They loved it.
Yeah.
But it does. It has a purpose. It actually helps to trap moisture, hold it away from the skin, trap bacteria, so it makes you less likely to have infection. So hair removal could actually make you more predisposed. And for some people, they need to do some of these things. Others, they've got really sensitive skin. They need to do all of them. It just kind of see what you might need to do. And know that the health, the quality of your skin, it changes. So going through menopause, when your estrogen levels drop, there's a lot less estrogen. There's a lot less discharge flushing out the bacteria. The skin is a lot more sensitive. So it's a great time if people are noticing changes to talk with their doctor. Sometimes you need estrogen in the vagina by medicine to help kind of plump it up and help get rid of either vaginal infections or even recurrent bladder infections. I'm sure your husband has run into this all the time, where estrogen actually helps prevent infections in the bladder because it helps keep that tissue healthy.
Is there any research on probiotics, like orally taking probiotics or bacteria to help with that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because there are so many probiotic companies out there, right? Like every feminine hygiene company now has a probiotic. And there is some data to show one strain. It's called Lactobacillus crispatus. This is like a science class now. Because there's lots of different kinds of lactobacillus, but it's L. crispatus. That's the actual one that we know is like does best in the vagina. And so it can be something that we recommend for some people to take, and it's taken by mouth. I think that we will get more information as we get more data. But when it comes to other probiotics, there's a lot more data to support it for gut health than there is for vaginal health. So two different things we're thinking about. And I know gastroenterologists are a big fan of it for gut health, but it's not like a one-to-one relationship for your vaginal health too.
Right. Mm-hmm. So last thing, vaginal discharge. You talked about it a little bit. One question that I thought of for discharge, when you're taking birth control, does that totally, because I never really noticed differences in vaginal discharge, like for my cycle when I was on the birth control pill. It was like, I hardly had any, ever. Yeah. But now it's like when I'm ovulating, it's like,
it's totally physiologic. So yes, you might notice that it's sort of stable when you're on the birth control pill because you're getting like the same little dose of hormones every day. And when you don't have that, you're going through more of a fluctuation, which is what's allowing your body to make an egg and release it and potentially get pregnant. And so what also changes is your cervical mucus. And that is one way that people who are not on hormonal birth control or any other kind of birth control, they can use that as a way to monitor their fertility, because we'll talk about when you're ovulating, you get like that egg white mucousy discharge, which is really slippery, and there can be a lot of it. And it has a purpose. It kind of helps the sperm get where it needs to get. And then right before your period, you might have almost none because of your hormone levels being different. So the answer is it's normal for it to not be that variable on birth control, but you can see those changes when you're not on it. And that can be one part of what we call the fertility awareness method or natural family plan. And it's more than just that, but that can be a part of it too, which I think is really cool when you're like, oh, look at that, it's changed. It's kind of cool to see.
I'm like, ooh. Hormones.
Yeah. And it's like very obvious a lot of times. Like you'll be like, oh yeah, definitely I must be ovulating. Like between that and like breast tenderness, these different things, you kind of notice it.
Is there a big range in the amount of discharge people have? Like some have very little, some have a lot.
Yeah. And it can change in your different ages. If you're doing other things like smoking, or using birth control, and it can be variable. And I've seen some people who come in and think that it's too much, and it can be also just if you're wearing a certain color underwear, it might look like a lot. And so I think I made a TikTok back in the day where I had like a spoon, and I was like, this could be, a whole teaspoon. And when you put it out on a liner or an underwear, it can look like a lot. It's like when kids spit up and you think they spit up the entire feed when they're babies, and then it's like only like a teaspoon or something. You're like, no, it must have been 6 ounces, because it just feels like that. But it can certainly vary. And then the closer you get to menopause, where those estrogen levels are changing, you can notice a drop for sure. Also with breastfeeding, same thing. Those estrogen levels are lower. So some people might notice that they have decreased discharge and need to use something like a moisturizer or a lubricant, or even sometimes local hormones to help if it's really painful, like with sex.
And so if people are wondering whether their vaginal discharge is normal or not, like what are some of the signs that they would look for to think like, oh, is something wrong?
Yeah. And I think because if you go on TikTok, it's like any discharge seems weird or gross or dirty, and it's actually very normal and healthy. So I tell people, you know your body best. If something feels off, let us know. But really, it's if it changes all of a sudden in color. So if it's like a frothy green or a bright yellow or a gray, that could be a sign of an infection. It could also be a sign that you like left a tampon in or a condom by accident. And trust me, every gynecologist has gone on the hunt for like the missing tampon, and we don't like whatever. Again, it's just another day at the office. We've all helped somebody out with that. So don't feel embarrassed. If there's any itching or burning, or if you notice any lesions or like bumps or things outside that look new, just let us know, because I know it's such a privileged thing to say, well, come see your doctor first, because I know it can be hard to get in. I know it costs money. If you can, that's ideal. And the reason I say that is because there's so many over-the-counter treatments, and we know, looking at studies, that we are really bad at diagnosing ourselves. So we think we have a yeast infection, but actually it's chlamydia, and now you've got a reaction to this, and you don't know if it's the cream that you used or the wash or the whatever, and now we have to like peel back the layers, and it's even more complicated. So ideally you're able to come in and we can check it out. And I think also if the odor changes too. So it is normal for vaginas to smell like vaginas, like a light musty odor. It's kind of like an alkaline kind of odor. But if it's very different and you're like, ooh, that is new for me, like come on in and get checked out, because it could be an infection for sure.
How often do people get pap tests where you are?
Yeah, because it's different depending on where you are, which is so fun in medicine to have so many different guidelines. And here in the US, I feel like we change them every 10 minutes. So the current most updated guidelines are starting at age 21, and it's every 3 to 5 years depending on your age and your HPV status. So it just depends. And back when I started,
21?
What is it in Canada? Is it?
I thought so. In Canada,
or?
No, in Canada it was like, when I was growing up, it was once you're sexually active.
Yeah, same. It used to be the same here. Within a year of sexual activity or by age 18.
Yeah. And then now it was every single year to get a pap test, but we just switched. When I was pregnant with Milo, he's 4 now, they switched it to every 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's every 3 to 5, depending on if you're also doing HPV testing. And we don't recommend HPV testing till after the age of 30. And the reason, because I have so many people who say, why are we not doing it every year? Isn't every year better? And I hear you, like, we're in a society of like more testing, much more data. It must be better, right? Like, we have an app for everything on our phone. But truly what we've seen is that what we're looking for is cervical cancer, which thankfully is rare and very slow growing, like over a span of decades. And so what we saw is that when we were testing younger people, they were then getting a workup, like colposcopies, procedures, removing pieces of the cervix or freezing them, and not fun stuff. And we saw that we weren't doing anything in terms of decreasing the cancer risk, because in that young age, so many of these would just clear and regress on their own. And so we were over treating without actually improving outcomes when it came to actually detecting cervical cancer. And so most of this too is related to the human papillomavirus, HPV, which is the common cold with a vagina. 80% of us have had it at some point in time. If you're having sex, it's not a shameful thing. And so we don't even screen for that until later on too, because so many of us will get it and then it will clear up. And so truly a combination of screening, some kind of screening, but not overdoing it, and really the HPV vaccination is really changing things and changing the game in terms of cervical cancers. So it's legit an anti-cancer vaccine, and I definitely recommend it. My son got his first at age 11, I believe, which I know a lot of parents are like, but my 11-year-old's not having sex. I'm like, I know, but the point is that, it's before anything. It's just think of it like, other things that we give out, like hepatitis vaccines and those kinds of things when they're babies. So, yeah.
Can anyone get an HPV? I'm the worst. I don't know anything about this. Can you get it at any age, or is it just
in the
for...
US, I don't know what the sitch is in Canada, but in the US, it's FDA approved up until age 45. And of course, because we live in a misogynistic society, it was only first approved in girls. Like, hello, how were they getting it? And then thankfully somebody was like, hi, how about, the penis too? So now it's both boys and girls, and they upped the FDA approval age to 45. However, you can still get it after that. And honestly, you should if you've got new sexual partners in your life, which we know that people are having sex longer and living longer, because it can still work. It's just that it hasn't been tested or FDA approved. So insurance may not cover it, but it's certainly a discussion you can have with your doc. It's not like it stops working after that age.
And why are we screening for cervical cancer, but not other things? Where did this pap test come from?
Yeah. And when you say not screening for other things, what do you mean?
Anything. Because you said it's rare. So why are we not getting other body scans or
Yeah.
Because it's...
Well, so part of the OBGYN visit is cancer screening for, age-based cancer screening. So it does include a breast exam starting at a certain age, mammograms for breast cancer. We have no good screening tests routinely for ovarian cancer, unfortunately. So we used to think that doing routine ultrasounds would help, but we know that didn't really do anything, because ovarian cancer is actually a very quick growing cancer. So you could be screened and within a year develop it. So it wasn't useful. But we're working on it. We're working on blood tests that might be more helpful. And we bring up colon cancer screening. Obviously we're not the ones doing it, but we can make the referral. So there are other screenings that we're doing. We also do STI, sexually transmitted infection screening. at our visits. So a lot of your annual exam, even though we're not doing a PAP annually, there's still other stuff we should be doing. So that's a message I think we need to get across, that you may not need a PAP every year, but it's still good to check in because there's lots of other things we should be checking into. Making sure your periods are okay. If you want to plan to have kids, do you need a preconception consult? All sorts of stuff. So, yeah.
But like, can someone just go to the doctor and be like, I want to be screened for lung cancer?
I think that you could ask. I think that your OBGYN wouldn't be the right person for it, but a primary care doc might say, and they do, there's screening guidelines for, you know, lung cancer screenings based on age and smoking status. And again, those have changed too since I was in med school when it came to like chest x-rays and that kind of thing. But yeah, and if you have a concern, for sure, bring it up with your doctor. I think the CDC website is a really great resource for anybody in the US and in Canada too, because you can go to the cancer page and they have different information about like what's recommended, what's not, things to look out for.
On my Instagram, I always talk about, because every year I'm very fair skin. I have lots of moles. So every year I go to a dermatologist and get like a full body check.
Yes.
And people are always like, oh my God, like, how do you get that done? And I'm like, oh my God, like, just go to your doctor. So it's weird that like certain things are not like implemented. Like, oh, it's your yearly, you know, every 2 years you get a full skin check. Like,
No, I do the same. And I didn't realize too how few people knew, because I think same thing. I posted on my Instagram, I'm here for my skin check, and they're like, what's a skin check? And I'm like, it's the biggest organ in your body. And here I live in the Pacific Northwest, which is super cloudy, but we have a huge skin cancer rate.
Canada.
Because people think they never have to wear sunscreen, right? You know. So yeah, my perfect world this is not really true, so please don't quote me on this, but I joke that I would love like a day where I could just be put in like a medically induced coma. And like as a mom, I would call it the mom coma. And you just get to sleep for like 24 hours, like best sleep of your life. And you can get everything done, you know, your mammogram, your breast exam, your pap, dental, skin. And then you wake up and you got this clean bill of health, you have pedicure, and you can go home. I think that's going to be the Medi-Spa that I invent that nobody will ever
honestly
find.
If you need like someone to test it out on, I'll go.
Oh my God. Just all these exhausted parents who like you just want to be knocked out for like
just
24
do everything
to 48 hours
all at once, and then I have no appointments for the rest or like the next 6 months or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I know.
Oh my gosh, you're
that's
on to
my
something.
That'll be my next big announcement.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Okay, well, this was an amazing conversation. You're going to have to come back because I have so many things that I want to ask you.
I love it.
Lastly, where can people find you online? So just tell us about like your YouTube, your TikTok, and if we can, and your book.
Yeah. All the things. So on social media, it's at Dr. Jennifer Lincoln, Dr. Jennifer Lincoln on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, a little bit of Twitter too. But that's not as fun. And then my podcast is Let's Talk About Down There. And what I love about it is it's different because I just answer people's questions. So you can call in, or what I think is honestly the easier way is you leave me a voice DM on my Instagram and you just ask a question. You don't have to talk to me. Don't worry. We keep it cool. You don't have to, think I'm going to pick up or anything like that, but you could just ask whatever. And then every week I answer 1 or 2 or 3 related questions. And it's a super fun way to chat with people. And then my book is called Let's Talk About Down There. And OBGYN answers all your burning questions without making you feel embarrassed for asking. And it's a book that I just didn't see out there. It's a super quick read. I call it a bathroom book because I think it's a great one to leave in there. And then you or your kids or your guests can read a little bit. It's Q&A based. It's broken up in sections like period problems, birth control basics, care down there. Super heavily illustrated, inclusive, and it's just really for the TikTok generation. It's not super wordy. Which, who has time for that, right?
No,
and
our
it's all
attention spans now are 15 to 30 seconds.
Exactly. You got to hook them in the first 2.7 seconds. But it's all evidence-based and references are in the back because I think that there's just so much misinformation out there. I wanted people to feel empowered and know that if they want to learn more, here's where you go. So all those places.
Would you say that's a good book for parents to buy for their daughters?
I would say like 16, 17 and up because it's not the first book that's explaining like, your body's going through some changes. It's the next book, which I think perfect timing is like your teenager's going off to college and you really want them to know how to be safe. And it's also good for older people. I've had people who've gone through menopause who've read the book and were like, I found this helpful because I didn't know this. And they shouldn't feel embarrassed because we weren't taught. So like, I would say that's like the second book you buy for your kid. The first one is like all the changes. The next one is like, here's how to really understand. If you're going to shave your labia, like, here's how to do it, or you know, how not to do it, or, you know, that kind of thing.
Don't take a cream bath.
Exactly. Never again.
Oh. Okay, well, thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you, and thanks for coming on.
It was so fun. Thanks for having me.
And I'm on a roll.